Good morning. I'm back with you after a week away. I was down in South Carolina visiting some friends. Beautiful springtime weather. Come back here, it's winter again. Not quite, but it's just can't get to springtime yet here in Connecticut. But it will. So today I want to finish the book of Judges, and we're going to start with chapter 10. I left off with, I don't know if I mentioned Abimelech. He was the son of Gideon, but through a concubine, and he didn't have a rightful place to leadership, and he is kind of an arrogant, rude, brutal person, and he suffers the fate of being crushed in his skull, a millstone thrown down by a woman on a wall, and he dies a very brutal death. So that's him, Abimelech. I'm not really going to get into him too much here. You could read about him in chapter 9. He's unprincipled and really was trying to do what even Gideon, his father, didn't do. He tried to make himself king. So I want to get to Jephthah eventually. In chapter 10, it says there were two other judges who were pretty inconsequential, Tola and Jair, who judged Israel for a time, and there really wasn't a lot of activity going on there. But we have the cyclical pattern again with Israel falling into sin, breaking covenant with God. Look at chapter 10, verse 6. It says, the sons of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord, served the Baals, the Ashtoreth, gods of Aram, Sidon, Moab, Ammon, gods of the Philistines, and thus they forsook the Lord and did not serve him. The anger of the Lord burned against them, and sold them into the hands of the Philistines and the hands of the sons of Ammon. Very similar here. The punishment comes through their disobedience, and the punishment is in the form of oppression from enemies. There's a lot to be said there that I really don't have the time to go into, but we open ourselves up to the enemy when we are disobedient to God. I'm not just talking about, making a mistake. I'm talking about a willful, premeditated serving other gods, in a sense, idolatry. So Israel is oppressed, and there's a couple of instances here where they cry out to the Lord. And interesting, the Lord gives them a reminder of where they've been coming from and lets them be oppressed for 18 years, something like that. The idolatry increased, but then they come to their senses, if you will, if I can use the language of the prodigal son. They cry out to God, and the Lord is going to bring them another judge by the name of Jephthah. Now, he's got an interesting past here. He's the son of a prostitute, and they jeer him and taunt him, the people of the land, as he grows up, pretty much casting him out of Israel. And he goes to the land of Tob and gathers around him some people, like-minded. They don't fit in. They're warriors. And he makes guerrilla raids against the enemy, and these exploits become known. So now here's Israel again in this pattern of being disobedient, and the Philistines and others are oppressing them. What do? They cry out to God, and they say, we need a leader. And guess who they go to? The man that they taunted and jeered and cast out of the land, Jephthah himself. I like what it says here in chapter 11 of Judges. It says, they went to get Jephthah from the land of Tob, verse 5, and they said to him, come, be our chief, that we may fight against the sons of Ammon. And Jephthah said to the elders, did you not hate me and drive me from my father's house? So why have you come to me now that you're in trouble? They never give him an answer to this question. They say, we've returned to make you chief and to fight our battles for us. So Jephthah does. Big-hearted guy here. I mean, after all the rejection and being an outcast, he comes back to help his brethren. And he says, they say, the Lord is witness between us. Surely we'll do as you say. They're in trouble, so now they reach out to the very man they rejected. So Jephthah, with his men around him, now he's got Israel behind him as well, and he goes and fights the battles for Israel against the Philistines. In chapter 11, it has a very tragic thing that takes place here. But before I get to that, there were a lot of armies against Jephthah, not just Philistines and Ammonites, but others as well. The numbers, the odds were probably overwhelming to him that, can I really win this battle? And he makes a tragic vow in chapter 11, verse 29. Actually 30, let me read that. If you will indeed give the sons of Ammon into my hand, then it shall be that whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the sons of Ammon, it shall be the Lord's, and I will offer it up as a burnt offering. And then he goes out and he causes a great slaughter. The sons of Ammon were subdued before him. So, if you will, kind of a fleece again, like Gideon. And here's the tragic part. He comes back to his house, and behold, his daughter comes out to meet him with tambourines and dancing. She was his only child. Doesn't say anything about a wife here. He had no other son or daughter. When he saw her, verse 35, he tears his clothes and says, Alas, my daughter, you brought me very low, and you are among those who trouble me. For I have given my word to the Lord, and I cannot take it back. Now, this is a controversial passage. Some people think he really did, give up his daughter as a burnt offering to the Lord. Others say, no. How can they justify that? Well, first of all, a lot of times in antiquity, you had animals living in your home, or at least, right in the courtyard or whatever. Sheep, goats, chickens, things like that. So look at, again, where he says, when I come back in peace, whatever comes out of the door, I will offer it up as a burnt offering. I don't think he was even suspecting his daughter would be even home, because a lot of commentators believe he took his daughter away from the scene of battle, put her in a safe place, maybe with some friends or relatives or whatever. Never expected the daughter to come through the house. He was shocked and then eventually grieved because she was the one who came through the door. So that tells you he probably didn't expect her to be there because she wasn't there. So she comes out and he says, I've given my word to the Lord. And she says, let this thing be done to me. Let me alone for 2 months that I may go to the mountains and weep because of my virginity, I and my companions. And he says, go. She probably was, 12, 13, 14 years old, something like that. And then it says, after 2 months, she returned to her father, who did to her according to the vow which she had made. And thus she had no relations with a man. Thus it became a custom in Israel, and they commemorate the daughter, I think it was 4 days in the year. Remember, the law of Moses forbid any kind of sacrifice, human sacrifice, in Israel. So with that, it really doesn't make sense. And I believe Jephthah knew the law. He was a Jew. He was an Israelite. So, to make her a burnt offering probably was not in the works in this way. And I believe the whole idea here was to send her to perpetual virginity. In Israel in those days, and even in the Middle East today, in other areas of the world, to be childless was a sense of shame, embarrassment. Motherhood was sacred. And that's what happens here. She's going to be a virgin for the rest of her life. No man, no child, and she's sent away, and that's her fate. I believe that's the true interpretation of this passage. I don't believe Jephthah sacrificed her as a burnt offering. That would have really been appalling in Israel, and there was no precedent for that whatsoever. The heathen nations did that, around Israel sacrificed their sons to, Molech, one of their make-believe gods, if you will, but not the Israelites. So that's the story of Jephthah. One other thing I don't really want to get into too much. The sons of Ephraim, which was a tribe descended from Joseph, they're upset with him because they felt he didn't call them into battle. He actually did, but they declined. And then they rise up against them and he defeats them in a battle. So then it says the land had rest for 40 years. And now we get to the story of Samson. Verse 1, chapter 13. Again, the sons of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, so that the Lord gave them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years, oppressed by enemies. Dan is the tribe where Samson is from. And the Israelites, again, depart from God. Samson's story is a story of opportunity and failure. He is appointed before birth. Look at chapter 13. We have an angel of the Lord come to the wife of a man named Manoah, who becomes Samson's parents. And he gives her a word. She's barren. You're going to have a son. He's meant to be a Nazirite. No cutting of the hair, no drinking of alcohol. And he is going to deliver Israel from the hands of the Philistines. The woman goes and gets her husband, tells him this word. The angel returns and speaks to both of them. And there is a little meal here in which the angel of the Lord rises up out of the flame, and they know it's divinity. This is not a regular angel. We believe this is another theophany, an appearance of Jesus in the Old Testament. Why? Because they fall on their faces and worship him. Angels would not allow men to worship them. So Samson is born miraculously, and he grows up. Probably 20 years have passed at this time, and it says at the end of 13, and the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him, and he goes down into the land of the Philistines. Samson's greatest weakness was his careless attitude toward heathen women, especially the Philistines. He sees a woman he likes in Timnah, and he says to his father, "Get her for me, for she looks good to me." He wants a wife. The father says, "Can't you take somebody here from the children of Israel, your brethren?" He doesn't want that. He wants to seek entertainment in the land of the enemy. You cannot go into the lair of the enemy and come out of that unscathed. So a lot of different stories here with the Lord coming upon Samson mightily. He's got supernatural strength. At this point, the Lord is intending to employ miraculous powers in one man rather than in armies, which he previously had done with Israel. There's one part where he's going down and a lion comes roaring out at him. He takes the lion and breaks his jaw in half, tears him like it would a lesser animal. I see something of the New Testament here in 1 Peter 5:8. What does it say? The devil prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. So Samson develops confidence in his physical powers, and he thinks, he's unbeatable. And he is going to a wedding feast, his own, and he gives a riddle to the Philistines, and they can't solve it, about the lion, which now has a swarm of bees in it making honey. And he's talking about, something out of the eater comes something sweet. They don't get the riddle after 3 days, but they take his wife-to-be, force her to divulge the riddle, and Samson knows this. He says, "If you hadn't plowed with my heifer, you wouldn't have solved my riddle." A play on words here. So the deal was 30 changes of clothing or these kinds of things, raiments. He goes down and kills 30 men and takes the clothes and gives them to him. And that sets the stage for a lot of, revenge and trying to get rid of him. He becomes a personal enemy to the Philistines. At one point, he takes all these foxes and puts ties their tails together, puts a torch there, lights it up, and they go and they destroy all the wheat and the grain in their fields. Now he's public enemy number one, and they are trying to get rid of him. So another instance where he kills 1,000 men with the jawbone of a donkey. Supernatural things take place. You've got miracles and faith operating in the life of Samson. However, the Philistines know his weakness. He is among prostitutes, and there's one that stands out here by the name of Delilah. They enlist her with a bribe of money to find out the secret of Samson's great strength. They probably thought it was some kind of an amulet or charm that he wore that gave him his power. They didn't expect it to be from God. So on 3 different occasions, Samson is sleeping on Delilah's lap. She's got Philistines waiting in the doorway, and he tells her, if you bind me with ropes that have never been used before, I'll be helpless like any other man. That was a lie. He puts her off. He's playing with her. Finally, she wears him down with nagging and persistent, you don't love me, you haven't told me the truth. And he tells her all that's in his heart. I'm a Nazirite from God, from my birth. If I'm shaved, I'll become like any other man. So again, she's got the Philistines waiting. A man comes in, cuts his hair off, and she says, Samson, the Philistines have come upon you. And he wakes up, and he thinks he still has the supernatural power, the goods. He doesn't. They grab him, they bring him down to a prison grinder, they gouge his eyes out, and they make fun of him and have him grind in a mill, much to their amusement. This is what happens to this great man of God. This is the failure part. He had the opportunity to deliver Israel and be one of the greatest men in all the history of the land, and he succumbs to moral weakness. Very much a sign for anybody in Christendom today, but especially leaders. As we see over the years, many have fallen away from the faith because of temptation into sexual things. So finally, Samson is avenged. At the end of chapter 16, again, they have a whole contingency of Philistines come into their temple, and he is brought out, and they're laughing at him, ridiculing him, and he gets a hold. Probably it doesn't say this here, but a lot of people think a young boy brought him to the pillars of where the temple, the load beams of the house here, and he puts his hands on them and prays, Lord, one more time, will you give me strength that I might avenge my enemies because of my 2 eyes? And the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him. He pushes the pillars, the roof caves in, and I think it says 3,000 Philistines, probably many of the leaders, if not all of them, die in this one cataclysmic event. So Samson, what he fails to do in his life, he accomplishes in his death. He is to leave the Philistine nation leaderless. His hair began to grow again as a sign of repentance in the soul. And that's when he cried out to the Lord, give me vengeance for my enemies. It's the story of the deliverer, the judge, needing deliverance himself. Unfortunately, he gets it in this way, and the Philistines are subdued for a long, long period of time. But now you have no more judges. We're setting the stage eventually for Samuel to come along. That'll be after the book of Ruth, which was probably in the book of Judges. Samuel is the last judge, and he's also a prophet. We'll get to him in a couple of weeks. One other story I really don't have the time to get into about a Levite's concubine. You can read that for yourselves in the latter part of Judges 19 and 20 and 21. So that is the story of Samson. The people of God need to stay in covenant with him, love, serve, honor him, respect him, be obedient. And the leaders of the church need to be moral and upright. not giving in to temptation in any way of sexual immorality, because they will suffer the consequences. It really happens to the whole church. You get a leader to fall this way, it trickles down, and the church is more than likely never the same. So be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. We may not have the supernatural strength physically of a Samson, but we have the strength of the Lord. The joy of the Lord is our strength. Okay, we'll see you next week for the book of Ruth. God bless.